Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you might be. I am Nicole BC, and you know everything. The official countdown begins. It's always like, hold your breath.
Yeah, countdowns do have that effect. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you, Noah. Thank you so much for being here. It's really exciting to have you on my podcast. We just did this, but me on yours, which was super fun. I encourage everybody listening to go and check that out, the show. I didn't actually introduce you. So Noah Lampert is the host of Synchronicity, a podcast that I've been a huge fan of. He is also someone that is, I would say, invested, purposefully so, in the cryptocurrencies and kind of Web3 sphere, which is another place that we have worked with each other. He is a community builder and community host. And I encourage everybody listening, if you're not on the Discord, to find him on Patreon, get access to the Discord. There's so many fun things happening in that different community, whatever it is that you're kind of interested in, whether it's like esoterica or writing or spiritual development, the imagination techniques specifically, but then also like we go deep into the cryptoverse as well. So I have learned so much from you, and I'm so grateful for your work and for you putting it out in the world. And yeah, I mean, I kind of like to give everybody the opportunity to talk about their origin story, and I give them a fork in the road. You can either tell us like how you got to this very specific moment on this specific podcast, or just a more general overview, like how did Noah get here?
It's a super broad, intense question. I will answer it.
Welcome to me.
Super
broad, very intense.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I will get into as succinct and impactful description of that as possible. For me, I would say like my path towards like just a broader awareness of just like outside of my limited perspective as like a kid and a child was when I started doing psychedelics at a relatively early age. I was 15, I think, when I did acid for the first time. And it was very intentional. It wasn't just like a willy-nilly decision off the cuff. I was constantly reading books about psychedelics and as much as I could. Nevertheless, I pursued this stuff. I was really interested in it because I'd heard these amazing descriptions of, your consciousness being altered. And I think on some level, I've just always been interested in the nature of mind, how we think, how we process things, the relationships between our inner and outer experiences or realities. So I jumped on the psychedelic train, had, a solid 8-year run from like 15 to 23 or so, where like I really went pretty deep. Not everyday usage, not even every week at times, but at different periods of my life, heavier use of psychedelics. And I try to point out that it's an interesting time to be doing psychedelics in your life because your identity is like trying to form itself at like 15. Like you're really trying to like figure out like what's my place in the world, like what do I want to do? And all this is like a lot of stuff is going on. And psychedelics tend to have this effect of kind of stripping away those senses of identity and those kind of not just ego stuff, but just like layers of the onion, whatever you want to call it. I graduated from a music school with a music degree. So there's very little real world application for that. I didn't want to be a music teacher, didn't go to school for that, just was interested in music. And I was like, all right, music, I guess. So I graduated from Berkeley and Boston with a degree in music synthesis, which is about as useful as you think it would be in the professional world. And this was like right 2008, I think I eventually graduated. And I took a year off from school in between there because I had taken at one point a lot of psychedelics. And I kind of had a break from reality. I mean, I say that term very loosely because I think reality is a very nebulous, ill-defined term, and most people's versions of it are wildly different. But this was a pretty drastic break. Like I was really swimming in the mystic waters and, borderline drowning at times. I was having a great time. But at that point, I was also diagnosed bipolar disorder and given a prescription to lithium, which I took for 3-4 years, went to my psychiatrist, went to my family and was like, I don't think I'm bipolar. Like I don't think I need this. Can we like get off it and see if I'm okay? So they agreed, did it, responsibly, didn't just flush my pills down the toilet and be like, the power of my mind is superior. But I believed that. I felt like that. And, I have not had lithium ever since. I haven't had any major manic. I think the same sways and emotions that many people experience just living life is about what I go through. I do have a tendency to be very intense in terms of my experiences. I get very high highs. I don't get the lowest of lows, but I feel things deeply. So when they're really good, I feel it as really awesome. When they're not great, I feel that as not so great. So, but it really shaped my opinion and thoughts on mental illness as well. So I pepper that in every so often on the podcast and when I'm speaking to people, just because I do think it's important to at least look at the paradigms of mental illness and how it's defined. And then after school, I found myself working with a lot of nonprofits in the spiritual world. So I got a job with Ram Dass's Love Serve Remember Foundation, and set up kind of their entire digital media landscape and just kind of overhauled just how they were doing things. I think they were still getting people to send them like physical donations to help support Ram Dass at that point, because they didn't have a ton of revenue streams, and the ones they did have were kind of drying up. Like they weren't really being able to sustain them for that much longer. So I went in there, did a lot of fun stuff, kind of just like social media. Like people weren't even advertising on Facebook yet. There was no Facebook ads. I just recognized it as a potential source for people to kind of congregate and get the message out and just share what Ram Dass was all about and his guru, Neem Karoli Baba. And I had a great, must have been 3, 4, 5-year run with them. And so through that, though, I started my own podcast, Synchronicity. And it really wasn't like a very honorable, or even it was somewhat purpose driven, but I had been around these podcasts for so long and hosted a few things here and there. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I can do this. So let me start my own podcast. Primarily started out the first 4 or 5 years just interviewing. I think every episode was a guest, which was amazing. It's actually really a powerful exercise when you connect with a new person every week for, 200 something odd weeks. And then around 2019, I discovered Neville Goddard. It sounds so simplistic when I say it like that, but I really believe this was like a multi-decade process for kind of having something click. Yes, it clicks in an instant, but sometimes the preparation and kind of where you are, the auspiciousness of the moment influences how quickly something actually connects and you really get something. And he was talking about some wild stuff. Your imagination is God. That's the only God. There is no other God. Jesus Christ wasn't a person. It's your imagination. And I'm like, something about what this guy is saying really is making sense to me. This is lining up with a lot of my experience. And it's very weird. It's very kind of I don't know where this came from. But I downloaded all these talks, started listening to them, and then diligently started to employ them. And before that, I don't think I had really done many solo casts, maybe one here and there. For every 100, maybe I jumped on the mic alone and just started talking. But after listening to these and kind of really putting them into action and seeing the efficacy of them, I was like, oh my God, this is clearly something I should be talking about. If this worked for me so well, so quickly, I would love to be able to communicate this to people who maybe were in similar situations or felt in situations that were, very difficult to get out of, or they're stuck, or things just haven't been working or hasn't gone their way, or whatever it is, just kind of, suffering, and it's in no small part. And so I started talking about it. Some friends, connected with me via podcasts, our little soul group there. I don't know how we would describe ourselves. We kind of know who we are. And it just started kind of a very intense kind of opening period in my life. I ended up getting divorced. I had 2 kids with my previous wife, got remarried, have a now 2.5-year-old with my current wife, started traveling a lot. Hadn't really done that in the past, and just kind of had a classic life shift moment when I started kind of discovering this stuff. And I really do attribute it to just kind of the belief that this stuff works. And I realized that's such a huge component, one that's not always easily changeable, but your belief structures really do determine what outside reality is. And I could see the clear relationship between every period of my life, how I was thinking, how I was feeling, and what I was getting. when I felt frustrated, when I felt like I couldn't do it, when I felt like things weren't working out, when I felt like money was super tight, those things were reflected back to me. The question is like, okay, I know that now, but let's say I still feel like that. Like, what do I do then? Because I'm aware that this is creating a reality that I'm not loving, but I just can't stop thinking those thoughts. I just can't, let myself, think things are going to work out or things are good or I am abundant. And that's when I started kind of realizing that like, that's something that a lot of people, including myself at times, which I can tend to forget when things are going really well, do struggle with that. And that kind of currently shapes what I feel like I'm talking about on the podcast, what the Patreon's about, what all these communities and groups that I've kind of set up and work within. And so a lot of my experiences, even with crypto, as you mentioned, where like I made a lot of money in 2017, I spit back a lot of it. I made a lot of more money in 2021, 2022, 23. I spit back a lot of it. I spent way more of it that time, but I learned lessons. And one of the lessons I learned is I had attributed so much of my malaise or kind of frustration to money issues. It's like, oh, I don't have enough money, so I can't do the things I want. If I had enough money, I wouldn't have to worry about these things, and then I'd be able to do this. And it was like just completely blown apart as an excuse for me because I had more money than I knew what to do with, literally. Like I was giving away a ton. I was like buying, I ran out of stuff to buy. I was just like, I don't have a use for this anymore. And what tends to happen when you get to that point is you don't hang on to it because you're not using it. You don't have a reason. You don't have a purpose for it. And it will inevitably kind of vanish it will slip through your fingers. But it was important for me to kind of, I personally believe, go through, like people can be like, well, don't you wish you sold more and cashed out more? You'd be in such a better position. I was like, no, I actually yeah, everyone would want some more money in their pocket, especially when things are kind of tight at times. But like that experience taught me way more about money, my own happiness, my sense of fulfillment, what I'm able to do because I had it and I wasn't happier. I was actually more upset when I had the money, which was a real blower for me because I thought that was going to be the thing. Like a lot of people do. It's a very common thing to attribute peace, happiness, wellness to money, even though we have infinite examples of people with countless amounts of money who clearly do not seem happy and will even explicitly tell you it did not make them happy. We don't believe it, right? Some of us have to kind of go through that experience to kind of fully understand it. We have to play it out. We have to be hands-on. So I went through that and, what happens to me when I tend to shift into a lower vibrational, mode, which people refer to as depression or just like, not having the energy to do stuff. I stopped doing the basic things that help me sustain and build that, right? Exercising, doing the podcast, making music and being present, spending time with my family. Like those things all kind of fell by the wayside. And it just kind of like got me down into a deeper spiral, which at a certain point, I was like, this isn't doing it for me. Like, this is like, I see what I'm doing here. I understand it's going to take some effort and work to kind of like shift my vibes, but like, this isn't the rest of my life. Like, I'm not going to stay in this position. Like, if everything is impermanent, I know even that's true. So why don't I start to do something to get more aligned with what makes me excited, what I feel interested in? And so I kind of reinvested in myself at first and then started doing the podcast again. This is like, 8 months ago, not too long ago. So it kind of just like, again, I think I clearly needed to be humbled in a lot of ways. Not so much because of what my intentions were, but because I didn't see what the value of this was for me even. Like I didn't understand like doing the thing, being able to do something you're excited about is a privilege. It's something that I think everyone has access to, but it does require you kind of aligning yourself with what not only are you maybe talented in, but are able to sustain and have energy and passion. And then when those things connect, that's when I think kind of the magic happens.
I think the magic bullet, like the sort of other side of that coin, is that we're going to arrive at an experience that feels final. And both of those are things that we desire and achieve. And in the moment of achieving it, recognize that there's so much more room for activities.
Yeah.
And, you described it as being humbled. And again, I think the flip side of that is being reminded. And something I don't really talk about very often and I don't think you and I have had this conversation. So just to give you a little background on me, when I was 14, and I'm sharing this because I think this has actually a lot to do with creative energy and what you talked about, this discipline and this consistency. So I'll get there, I promise. But when I was 14, I was actually diagnosed with a terminal illness. I had a brain tumor. I thought I had brain cancer. It took the doctors about 6 months to figure that out. And in the meantime, I was tested for everything under the sun. And I became very aware of the fact these people have no fucking idea what they're doing. Yeah. And every authority figure that I depended on and believed in was like just as lost as I was, essentially. And, you know, I kind of watched my parents deteriorate because there's probably nothing worse that you could call in than like a terminally ill child.
Totally.
And I also just kind of watched my case get volleyed around because it was the diagnoses came around at like MRIs. There was a lot of technology that hadn't really been used in that capacity before. And so I decided that firstly, like everyone's an asshole, has no idea what they're doing, and that I'm going to be fine. And these people are just idiots. And it kind of like accelerated my like punks rock, fuck you, fuck this attitude. And also was the reason that I survived. And I think I had like an 8% like chance of survival.
Wow, that's
and
incredible.
It was miraculous. Yeah. And also it was like a hard, you know, people talk about like their awakening experience and like what mine was very young. And I think that was actually around 2000. No, sorry, that was much earlier, like 1994. And I got better immediately, like ran away to Europe, and then ended up on the East Coast. And that kind of was like the beginning of my psychedelic journey. So it was actually right around the same time as yours. I'm just a little bit older than you.
Yeah.
But I wasn't doing it consciously. Like I wasn't doing it every day. I was doing all of the like chemicals, the plants, the jungles. Like I had a friend of mine who was, shall we say, commercially involved in the psychedelic industry.
Yeah, of course.
And so was staying at my house, and in exchange was, you know, allowing me to sample their product on a daily basis, whether or not that was a conscious choice or a hilarious joke, because that was like our warped sense of humor at the time.
Right.
And what I realized, and definitely going way too far, way too often, was this conscious choice. And in any one of those sort of psychonaut experiences, like it could go very dark and I could bring it back. I could like trip the light fantastic and explore like other universes and dimensions. Or like I could just be like at a gig watching music and seeing the actual like tunes and vibrate, you know, anywho. And initially I thought maybe that was like a control thing that I was seeking, or I wasn't letting myself kind of really fall into that abyss that I think psychonauting can like take you to. But fast forward a little bit, and I had also been diagnosed with clinical depression, anxiety, all sorts of fun, you know, ADHD, like fun little labels that. But because I'm pretty anti medications and diagnoses for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
I've had some pretty acute experiences where I was on antidepressants, but they also felt like being on drugs, just different kinds of drugs. And so, as you know, I used those to get me out of a particular pattern that had become really unhealthy. Fast forward probably about a decade, and I was in New Orleans running a nonprofit arts center, doing a whole bunch of different stuff. I had just like abandoned my career and life in Australia, and I was feeling like pretty unstable in terms of who am I and what is my work and why am I here? And I was acutely depressed. And because I've worked for myself for so long, I was very able to hide my own kind of struggles in that regard. Like I would just tell people I was PMSing. I would just hide behind a computer, like in my own house. And I stumbled upon Louise Hay, who's one of the
amazing.
OGs.
Yeah.
She is phenomenal. And she had all of these affirmations. And I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't take showers. Like I was in like depression. And
Totally.
I remember listening, I was like ripping her stuff off the internet.
Yeah, that's how you do it.
And I remember listening to these affirmations, and in one of her books, she had talked about, you know, you don't have to believe any of this, but just go through the motions. And one day it's going to resonate. And I distinctly remember that day of waking up and being like, I am all right. I am grateful to be alive. Like I am here. And it was this moment of remembering, being reminded of, actually, we do get to choose. And it is a discipline. And that consistency does take inertia and momentum to get started. But with that approach, and the reason I wanted to bring this up is it hadn't occurred to me. I hadn't made that connection of like these affirmations. And what I was ultimately doing was imaginal techniques.
Yeah, of course.
Because I would used to spend like from like 4 a.m. until 7 a.m. in bed, just like in the war in my head. And what those affirmations and then ultimately imaginings allowed me to do was like call in that feeling and that frequency that I wanted, which was just to like, on the flip side, I was living my dream life. Like I'm in New Orleans, which was a city I've been obsessed with since I'd visited the first time when I was 20 for a gig.
Yeah.
I'm running an arts center that's servicing like children and helping bring arts into children's lives. I'm working with this amazing foundation and I'm getting to put on these art festivals and like I'm surrounded by creatives and people doing really powerful work. And I'm like, I can't get out of bed in the morning and I can't be my whole self because I'm so ashamed of how like borderline I am right now. And just simply allowing myself to play with those imaginal techniques it was shocking how quickly, I think it was a matter of weeks. Yeah. I think there was a hurricane in there. So I was literally like trapped in my house for like 10 days.
Up. Yeah.
But yeah, like 3 weeks. And just that change in frequency and that commitment to the consistent thought literally turned myself and then my whole life around.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty wild. I mean, it's something that I just think part of the reason that framing it as kind of imaginal techniques or just defining your consciousness as God or everything. I mean, God is such a large charged term for so many people. I actually like it. I actually really like all of the biblical frameworks that Neville Goddard and a lot of the New Thought people kind of gravitated to, because I think it's a very easy thing to either dismiss or accept as literal. And I think both of those approaches are misguided. I don't believe in the historical accuracy of scripture. Any scripture that we read that we would consider holy or mystical, ranging from Eastern to Western, anything, I don't believe it's literal. It could be. I open the possibility of that existing.
Yes. yes. I like, the scripture and the different teachings and even the different like gurus that are out there. I think it's interesting that you worked with somebody that a lot of people, I think collectively on a mass level look up to and to some degree worship, in the same sense that people would look to the Bible for a similar level of support, shall we say. And ultimately, I think all we're doing is using words to try and describe energy. And like you said, we're all having our own experience, yet there is a universal experience to be observed and potentially to learn from. And I think something that I certainly participated in was a hardcore level of skepticism, anti-theism, and doubt. And what was fascinating about the Louise Hay experience for me is I was kind of on the other side of multiple cycles of like, have faith, which was a concept I hadn't really understood or practiced, if I'm being totally honest, or like, nothing matters and everything is truly material and transient and that. And like trying, I think people like you and I, what we're doing, at least in this moment and more recently, is sharing the tools and experiences and our ability to translate the energy into words with the hopes that does resonate with someone. And like music for me, I originally found that when I was sick, because I could listen to these songs and hear these lyrics of people having a human experience, and I could relate to that sense of loss and that sense of fear and recognize that like, I don't know you. We might not even be alive at the same time, but yet we're sharing this experience, which is another reason I love reading so much. Totally. And I think like, and where I'm trying to go with this is you mentioned there's work that you do for money. There's work that you do really, I think, to just actually kind of support this collective experience that we're having. And there is an exchange. And the way that we in this moment have kind of defined it is in terms of like the dollar value amount. But we also know that that's like completely make believe.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're an artist, you're a creator, you're a teacher, you're also an investor. How do you kind of navigate that like dichotomy of like, I got to sell because I got to pay the bills, but also like this work was probably not ever intended to be bought and sold, yet here we are.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I tend to look at how I got started doing tarot and energy readings, because I think I also was very skeptical. I hadn't received many readings in my life, and the few that I had were impactful and they meant a lot to me, but it's not something I went and sought out. But I did kind of have the imaginal act to understand tarot and astrology. And up until that point, it had always kind of felt like looking at the outside in, playing around a little bit, but not really getting it. But when I really kind of like committed to understanding what is this about, it started to click. I started to get that these are subtle energies that represent subconscious states of mind and energy, and we can use them to gauge our own reactions, the reactions of the person who is in front of us if they're getting a reading, how they fit together, what different combinations can mean, and kind of like what your intuition is also telling you. Because I always have had a pretty strong sense of intuition, just something, that guiding voice or force that kind of lets you know things like, how should I know that? And then it's, oh, wow, that's true. That's interesting. So when I first started out, I did all free readings. Literally, I had a podcast downloaded by thousands of people, and I was smart or stupid enough to say on air, like, I'm doing readings. They're free. If you want one, sign up here. They're totally free. Must have gotten like 200-300 people reaching out. And at that time, I was just writing them down. I was like pulling cards, writing down, and just kind of getting familiar. That scaled up within about a year to, I charge a good amount for readings. I mean, in-person readings in LA, I was charging over $500 for, 45 minutes for, and people were happily paying and, ecstatic after these meetings. I mean, I think out of probably 1,000 readings I've done at this point, maybe like 2 or 3 people like afterwards were like, I just didn't hit home for me, and I refund their money. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, I'm not trying to, it's not what I'm doing here. But a very high percentage of people really feeling like there was something valuable there. And I can feel it too during the readings. Like, I know like, oh, something is happening here, but that takes a while to get familiar with. Like I said, it's a year. I started charging $5 for one of those readings, then $10, and then it kind of expanding them. If someone wanted to get on the phone, maybe like $40, $50. Like, it took time to feel like I believed in what I was doing enough to charge people money for that time and energy. And I've made it a point. I do these free readings on TikTok almost every day. I do think it's important to hold on to that sense of like giving and allowing, even if you charge a ton of money. I mean, you see lawyers do this a lot with pro bono work. It's the same kind of concept. So even if your time is very valuable, you've put in the work, you really know what you're doing, offering it for free, I think, is an important thing that allows you to express your gratitude that you are able to do this, that it helps you keep you honest so you don't just get caught up. Like, the second, I've luckily never felt like this with readings, but the second I felt like I was just doing this for money as like my primary drive, like, that's it. Like, hang it up, like, pump the brakes. Don't do that for a while, because that's just like, it's not the same thing. And then you trust that what you're putting out there will be received by the right people who get what you're doing and walk away happy. It's like, I get a lot of, retention and repeat people coming back to me for that reason, because it is doing something for them. And it does have the intention of being something that people can use for insight, clarity, guidance. Like, those are the things that I provide in that type of energy work, because I think those things are practical and they're useful. And sometimes you just need to hear it from some stranger who has a podcast or who you don't know, who's pulling cards somewhere else where you're not. Sometimes that's just what you need to hear. I've done that. I've done that with friends, with people I don't know, and I find it to be very helpful when you kind of find the right energy to loosen up a situation that maybe you just didn't have the right perspective, or the correct perspective. I don't even want to say correct, but just like the perspective that made it seem a little bit different for you. And so, we've spoken about this, personally and professionally. Like, I am very candid that I'm still figuring out the best application of how to do what I do in a way that feels authentic for me, where, it seems also sustainable and useful. I've recently kind of recognized that group work in particular definitely seems to be kind of the message that is coming through for me. I think I'll always do some level of one-to-one, but I'm seeing the power of community. I've been around communities. I've built a lot of communities, supported a lot over the years. And I see just kind of that energy being very helpful for a lot of people. And it's also more efficient, right? A community is not reliant. I also have no desire to be someone's leader, someone's guru. Even the word teacher, I don't think is completely something I resonate with. I think, like as close if we were going to get to a label, it's like some weird neo shamanism, something like it's there's a frequency and energy that I think I naturally can tap into that it can be useful for people for their own kind of insights or stuff that's going on. I mean, I am grateful every day that I can get on a microphone and record a bonus episode for the patrons, record a podcast for 45 minutes for the public one by myself, do a live stream that week. Like, I am not unaware that is not something everyone can do. And it's not something a lot of people who can do it don't trust themselves enough to kind of just sit and talk coherently for that period of time every week. But I recognize that as it's like a skill. It's a talent that I absolutely cherish and try to honor and support right now because it is, it's cool to me. Like, it's cool. I surprise myself. People probably, I don't know what people think when I release an episode or something, but I genuinely, if I don't go back and at least hear the resonant frequency of what's going on there, then I won't put it out. It doesn't happen that often. I'm lucky that, I can kind of nail these in one-offs, but I go back sometimes, and not in a narcissistic way. We'll go back and listen to podcasts that I've recorded and be like, what? This seems like something I would care about. Like, what did I say here? And I listen, and I go, oh my, holy shit. Like, I'm making really good points. Like, this makes a lot of sense to me. I guess I should listen to this because I guess I can understand why people would like this and what they're getting out of it. So I feel as long as I can tap into that frequency, and it does feel like a very natural state for me. It's not something I have to manufacture. It's not something where I have notes written down all the time, or, there's all this stuff I have to have organized in order to do it. I literally just set the intention, take a few deep breaths, maybe smoke a joint once in a while, and then just hit record and just kind of flow. And I've noticed that a lot of the stuff that I go through personally in my life seems to be stuff that other people are going through personally in their life, so in one degree or another. So, and as long as I get the feedback that people are finding this valuable and appreciative of it, I will continue to do it. And as long as it feels right for me. I mean, I that's the other thing. When I stopped recording for a couple years, not even a couple years, year and a half, I couldn't do it. I did not have that frequency available for me to get on a mic and talk. And it just felt completely dishonest and inauthentic to get on there and do any kind of imitation of what that would be. So people can trust when they're hearing me talk. I believe in what I'm saying because I just don't. This isn't about making money. It's not about attracting the biggest following possible. It's about doing something that can truly be useful or helpful at the very least for someone who would come across whatever it is I'm doing. And, yeah, I mean, this is not the best answer to how to I completely figure out how to do something that I never really planned on doing. But all I can do is what I enjoy and what excites me, and trust that there will be a path towards, even if not direct revenue from that, something that puts me in the right sphere or plane. Sometimes that's crypto. Sometimes it's crypto. Sometimes, it's not time to monetize this aspect of my world or life or creativity, and crypto tends to come in and just says, okay, we got it for a little bit. You can take your foot off the gas. You don't have to figure that out right now. Relax. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing. The money will be there. The abundance will be there. So I'm open to those things. But, when that starts happening, I got allured by the ease at times to make money. And I was like, oh, I'll just do this. I don't need to do the other stuff because this is doing everything. And that was, a critical lesson for me to learn, rather than, putting the cart before the horse, basically. I was definitely oh, the money is the thing. that's what I've been trying to do anyway. And it's like, no, it's not, you dope. Like, what do you think? Why, what? That doesn't even make sense. So, yeah, still figuring it out. But I mean, with your help in no small part, I think that I'm doing a better job of understanding what people like about what I talk about and what I do. And, just trying to stay true to that and do what feels right for me, and then trust that it's going to work out in a way that it tends to. So, yeah.
Well, you kind of answered one of my questions, which was like your creative process. And so I'm going to get back to that. One of the reasons I like, and you talk about this a lot, faith is more fun. And to me, it's beyond faith. It's simply knowing. And honestly, like pulling cards, astrology, like I was so fixed and driven and strategic, especially like in I looked at artists allowing me to manage their business and their careers as literally them handing me their baby and being like, watch this. Like, it's a huge responsibility. And ultimately, like, that's not my child. Like, what I'm going to try and do is facilitate this and steward this being and the way that I think you're telling me you want, like I'm going to try and raise your kid like really well. And I think I started with astrology, Rob Resney's positive astrology, like every good hippie does. And then because it helped get me out of my own fucking like narrow-minded fixicity, like strategic linear thinking, and pulling cards and tapping into these different like esoteric and occult teachings just really helped me understand there's a different way of looking at this. This is a multiple choice test. And having worked with art, and really, my ultimate job was to try and connect this thing that everybody thinks should be free to money so that people can sustain the creation process. And that's why like I'm always curious about like how do you kind of create this space for your creativity? And you already shared that with us. So then my question for you is like, how do you juggle? Because I think you said something interesting in there, which was when I kind of felt like the momentum and the actual creative process. And I mean, you went fucking hard. Like, It doesn't surprise me that like there's, burnout, for again, lack of a better way of describing it. But I think you released something like 2 episodes a week for like 3 or 4 years nonstop.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And then like this crypto thing, like you have a lot of different outlets for your creativity. And I literally mean your ability to create. And so how do you, I relate this back to faith and to knowing, because I think for someone who I consider myself to be multi-passionate with a bunch of different like pots cooking on the oven, but like not everything is going to be ready to serve at the same time. And sometimes some things need to simmer. And so I've certainly learned if something's demanding my attention in a particular moment, it's probably because it needs it. And you also talked about like being depressed, even though you're in alignment. Like I've spent the last few years caretaking a couple of different really important people in my life, very fucking aware this is taking me away from income and business. But like, and it was sad. It was fucking heartbreaking. And I could have looked at my experience and labeled it as depression, or just simply recognized like situationally, I was like more probably in alignment than I think I've been in a really, really long time. And it helped me tune into that frequency of knowing as opposed to faith, as opposed to belief, which I think are kind of like gradients of that frequency. But it's from the outside looking in, it's chaotic. And you somehow seem to juggle. I mean, you've got 3 kids like that are all single digits, which I think is like in and of itself unfucking believable.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You've got, multiple ways of connecting with, and I won't say teaching, how about playing the game with different people? How do you kind of like keep all the balls in the air?
I mean, honestly, like anyone with 3 kids and you're not doing anything else knows this. You don't always feel like you are. You like anyone who's like, oh, I got it all together. Like, I mean, there are people who are probably making, 6 figures, mid 6 figures, 3 kids. That's all they're doing. They're going to the office every day and they're probably questioning, am I doing a good job? Like, am I spending enough time with my kids? Am I raising them the way? Am I around it? Like there's a whole set of things that come up because kids just bring up all of this stuff that you probably didn't know was there. It's one of their benefits and kind of scary things about them. You get to see how you're doing with your kids based on how they're doing. So that's like your performance report.
Wow.
And I think that's important to recognize. Like if your kids are in an environment or are feeling loved and supported, they will thrive. It doesn't mean if they're not right now, it's even your fault. It just means that you do get that reflection back. So the kids, I mean, this is why, like, you know, most of my recent problems have all been centered around like lack abundance, just straight up financial resources. And I really started to like recognize that it doesn't feel good when that's happening, but of all of the things that could be not going well or could be better, that's the best one. Like it sounds wrong when you're desperate. And I say this from a place of knowing this is not just me hypothetically saying, oh, well, it must suck to not have money. Been there. That's the easiest problem to overcome. Your health is a huge one, as you know, and especially as a caretaker, seeing how it impacts people and the relationships around them is another one. That's like a big, super biggie. And then like your family, you know, your kids. Career alignment for me is very important. I know how I feel when I wake up every day and feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to. So one of the ways I stay kind of all of the balls juggled without them completely collapsing too much is I've developed like a routine for myself. Like this is when it really started to shift for me. This happened even just like as recent as like a month and a half, 2 months ago. I decided, you know, every Tuesday, I'm going to put out a podcast. Every Monday, which I haven't done today, but I will do it, I'm going to do a reading for the patrons. Every Thursday or every Wednesday, I'm going to do a regular episode of the podcast, bonus on Tuesdays. And every Thursday or Friday, I'm going to do a live stream. And if I miss one of those, like this last week, I did not do a live stream. I had intentions to do it on Friday and Saturday. I had my kids, Thanksgiving's coming up. I accept it. I go, you know what? I'm doing a lot of stuff. I'm still putting out a ton of things. It's not the end of the world. And if it's something that I can get to, I will absolutely get to it. And that consistency and schedule keeps me kind of tight enough. It keeps things organized enough. It's the same thing with like my physical health. You know, sometimes I'm killing it. I'm exercising exactly how hard I should be for as many days as I should be, for as long as I should be. And sometimes I'm like, damn, I'm barely getting enough steps to just like keep this at like an acceptable level for movement and activity. But I know that my benchmarks and consistency goals are there, so I can at least see where I'm not adhering to them in the best possible way. So that helps a lot because at least you have a framework for like you understand where you are in relationship. Like this week, I already know it's a chaotic week. Like it's absolutely insane. I can see it. I didn't get a live stream in starting last week. I'm late on my Monday thing. I'll do my Tuesday. I got a lot going on with my wife and my kid. My in-laws are in town, but it's not going to be like that forever. I know what I do on a regular basis. And if I have to take even a week off from all of those things, which is rare, I can usually find time for this stuff. I will if I have to. And I'll be candid about it. And I think people who expect things from me in the loosest sense of the word, like the Patreon community or podcast listeners, would understand that. It's not crazy. It's not like there's some like, you know, oh, wow, he's abandoning us, or he said he was going to do this thing and he's not. I've seen what it looks like to abandon audiences. You have to really stay at it for a long period of time for people to actually get bothered. But yeah, I mean, it's just like having a framework and recognizing like where you're at, like what is actually going on. If I acted like this 7-10 day period was just like any normal week, then I would burn out. I'd be burnt out by the end of Thanksgiving, right? I'd just be like, I would be useless for those next week or 2 or 3 because I would have just put in so much energy. So like, it's a holiday weekend. Shit happens. If I don't get on an episode of the podcast this week, so what? Who cares? It's free. People can listen to any of the other ones and there'll be another one next week. So I just like learn where it feels right for me to manage my own energy because I don't serve anyone if I can't just like have the basic level energy to do stuff. So I've just learned, I mean, and I don't always do an elegant job of juggling the balls, but the important parts of my life are pretty good, I got to say. So I guess I'm doing a decent enough job of managing those things. And your own innate capacity, this is something people will find. You always have more. It's an infinite allowance. And like you think like, well, how could I possibly do more? I had a friend teach me this. You know, he was amazing. And he was just like, you can always do more. Like you think you're doing a lot now, but it's nothing. You'll look back in 10 years and be like, oh my God, I'm doing so much. I have so much more on my plate than I did. Not in a bad way, but like you can always do more. So just recognize you have the capacity to grow and scale up if you want to, that's something that's important to you. So
everything feels really hard when you first start it. And this is where that consistency and that discipline, those words might have a certain like frequency that feels dissonant to you. Then think about it like ritual and practice. Like we forget what it's like to kind of suck at something. And the flip side of that is we also take our superpowers for granted. And I think like your art, your ability to help people understand not just the imaginal techniques, but like the community building and the connection, and your ability to like you said, just like essentially like translate energy into words is your superpower. And when I think about like the arts and monetizing these skills or these products, as I like to call them, even though again, that's another word that people like are like, ew, gross. But at the end of the day, we're selling something because like that's this exchange. And I think like when you are in a position to monetize your superpowers, that's pretty fucking cool. And that's like, artists originally had patrons in the sense that they had somebody that was quite literally willing to be like, live in my house, eat my food, and make some art for me. And it's how they were able to create these symphonies or these masterpieces. And now like fast forward capitalism like 2,000 years, and here we are. And that's why I loved the platform Patreon when it first began, because I can support people who are creating things that I want to see more of in this world.
Right.
And I don't tune into half of the Patreons that I am a supporter of regularly, but it's like, that's my exchange is I'm like, I believe in you. I love the work that you're doing. I want more of that. Like it allows me to like walk the walk and to invest in like what I literally want more of in my own experience. And I think it's so easy for myself, everybody included, to kind of take for granted that like our superpowers and what we really do. And like, of course, people are going to support you and appreciate your work, even if you don't ... This concept of expectation is evolving so rapidly now, because I think we're all starting to play with this idea, like I'm having my own experience, even though like you and I are currently in relationship with each other, like in this very moment. What you're experiencing is going to be wildly different than mine, and we'll probably never truly be able to like fully like connect on what that difference or similarities will be have happened. But which is, this is kind of a rough segue, so forgive me, everybody. But one of the reasons that I was fascinated by Noah, and also I just wanted to tell you this as well, because I don't think I've said this part out loud, like challenged by you, was when because I found you originally just due to some of your relationships with other people that I follow, but I've always been fascinated by cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, and then Ethereum. And then decentralized finance. It just really resonated with my own like participatory economics theories and systems. And you had your Patreon, you brought people into your Discord, and you were talking very actively about what you were getting into in cryptocurrencies. And where I'm going with all of this is like this idea that value/money is representative of something. And I think that's a chosen belief, which is really easy to say when you've had lots of money, when you've had no money, when you start to really like play with this energy of money.
Yeah.
But something I watched you do was go like all in on a particular coin. And what felt like seconds later to me, it was probably like centuries for you. You were like on to the next one. And what I realized in that being like, well, I thought this was going to be the thing forever. And like, was that, well, it is forever until it's not. And it's actually that knowing that allowed you, I think, to create the abundance and prosperity that you did. Was like you were all in until you weren't. And there was no attachment. Yeah. It was just like playing this fucking game. And the reason I love cryptocurrency so much, and you and I collaborated on a project, which we're going to share in the show notes, called Conscious Crypto, is it was the best way for me to understand my own energy around money. And really, like, as someone who thought they had graduated from the money game there for a minute, I saw my greed and my FOMO through crypto, which was like the best lesson I've gotten in terms of investment ever. Like, where am I hoarding money and where am I attached to something just for the sake of more now, again, faster, harder, longer? Like, it was fucking gross. But it took crypto to actually be able to show me that, because in it's such a noble cause when you're involved in the arts and helping artists and taking care of family and blah, blah, blah. In my own like physical experience, it was like this digital playground that really helped me like graduate to the next level. But I like would like to know, I guess from your perspective, how you kind of got into it, and then how you've really, and from my perspective, like mastered this playful energy with it. Cause I mean, you were up multiple millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we connected a few weeks back. And since then, like the whole market's kind of turned around. And so I thank your imaginal techniques for that. But you know, I remember teasing you about your long on Bitcoin and being like, good job.
Yeah. I mean, crypto I got into in 2013. I bought my first Bitcoin April 2013. It was like 100 something bucks, 130 bucks for a Bitcoin. I had found out about it through something called the Silk Road, which was a lot of people famously know as a dark web market. I never used it. I just heard about it, and I knew the way you had to pay for it was this thing called Bitcoin. And so I started looking into Bitcoin, started to understand the core tenets of what that blockchain technology actually provided, what its pros were, what its cons were. And I was like, you know what? I could see a use for this in the world. It's an idea that seems to be worth something. And I also kind of recognize that the way that this will derive value is by other people believing that it derives value. Because typically in investments, the narrative you're being pitched is, well, this has some real world application. This has a product behind it. This has a service. This has a problem it's solving. Bitcoin had some of those things, but it wasn't a product. It was a completely digital, made up, intangible thing. And that idea alone bothered a lot of people and continues to bother a lot of people. But it does have some advantages as a currency, as a store of value potentially. And you know, since then, we've seen it explode in popularity. A lot of people have made a lot of money from Bitcoin. And I got into the altcoins, alternative cryptocurrencies in 2017. I just kind of saw how a lot of this was structured around people's belief, just like the dollar is, just like the euro is, just like everything. I mean, it's not fundamentally different, except there are systems backed by militaries and energy and resources that provide the value for those things, seemingly. We're not on the gold standard. We don't have a silver standard. So I just kind of recognize that like things are worth what we believe they're worth, like on a very deep level. The embedded narratives and energies surrounding money are pretty warped for a lot of people. It feels like something we never have enough of. It feels like we're being controlled by it. It feels like the economy is bad, so we can't do well. Like there's all these stories around it. And cryptocurrency kind of taught me that if that's what you believe and you get into cryptocurrency, you're probably going to be washed out really quickly. And there is no one who has been involved with cryptocurrency for a decade or anything close to that who's not experienced massive loss. I mean, everyone has gone through that at one point or the other. If you learn and get better about steps you can take to avoid or mitigate some of those losses or deal with being all in on something and then completely being like, nope, that's not the thing. I'm into this thing now. And being okay with that as the game, as you said it, it offers a very asymmetric bet, a very unique opportunity in the realm of investing. I think we've seen some of that consciousness kind of creep into stocks, especially with the democratization kind of like, you know, things like Robinhood, which are bad and don't use those things, even though they seem like you should. The GameStop stuff. So we've seen this consciousness kind of go from place to place in the investing sphere. And crypto is about it. It's the most honest in a lot of ways. Which is ironic. It gets pitched as like the least trustable or the least secure, or like terrorists are using it or drug dealers. And it's like, oh my God, they all use dollars. What are you talking about? Everyone settles in the dollar. Like no one gives a shit about a little bit of Bitcoin. So, you know, I've just learned to some extent how to navigate those waters. I've learned when to trade, when not to trade. I've learned that if I make a bunch of money and I lose some of that money, it's not the end of the world. If I make a mistake or feel like I made a mistake, I don't let it get to me. My ability to handle loss is higher than most people. I don't I do get emotionally affected by it, and I do have regrets and like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have done that, or I wish I would have gotten that, but it doesn't crush me. I thought that it would before I started getting into this stuff, and it just doesn't, because I do view there always being another opportunity. And when bull markets start in crypto, you can turn a few $100s or a couple $1,000s into a lot, into substantial amounts. So a lot of it is just kind of waiting for the cycles to repeat and to play over again and try to be caught, get in a decent position so you can do well when that happens, because it does happen. Like, people are like, every time everyone is convinced cryptocurrency and Bitcoin is going to die, just teach yourself to buy a little bit and you'll be fine. You'll be told you don't even need an investing strategy. Just buy then. And then when everyone is convinced it's going to $1 million and it can never go down, sell. That's literally that's how this stuff works, because those are the saturation points for depression and bear markets, and the tops for bull markets and euphoria. So you kind of teach yourself to do the opposite in a lot of ways, and just to be loose with it. I mean, this is for having fun. When crypto stopped becoming fun for me, I should have sold. Like, it's that simple. When I felt like I needed to maintain or grow or keep up with something, and my days were spent staring at a computer screen, that's when I should have sold. And I guarantee you, if that even approaches how I'm feeling on the whole, I'm smashing sell. I'll get back in later. It's all good. So, I look at it like a game. I look at it a game that we learn and we get more skilled at playing. That's the goal. So you can't take every loss as final, and you can't take every win as you're a genius, but try to have fun with it and recognize it absolutely is a viable tool for making money. Anyone who says that it's not is just wrong. I've experienced it. I've seen other people experience it. I mean, the Discord has countless examples of people doing everything I just mentioned, making a lot, losing a lot, making a lot, keeping a lot. We had people in there who were on to Tau a year and a half ago. And it's it's magic beans. It's not really going to be worth anything. It's the best performing crypto over the past year and a half. It doesn't mean everything isn't magic beans. It doesn't mean that there is really some better inherent technical worth to these things. The chances of most of these cryptocurrencies being around in a few years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years is infinitesimally small, the same amount proportionally, if not less, than the Amazon still being around from the .com boom. But it's an emerging technology. There is money flowing into it. You got big institutional investors coming in last cycle. It won't be their last cycle. And that will pump money into the ecosystem. And if you're kind of chilling in something that is still around in a year or two, you'll probably do pretty well. But have your intention set around it beforehand so you don't get caught. Because if you do start making a lot of money, you just want to be prepared for what that actually is going to do as best you can. Mm-hmm. I mean, I thought I was, and then I was like, oh, I got 2 million. Wouldn't it be nice to have 5? Wouldn't it be great to have 10? If I had 50, my kids would be good forever. It's just these weird thoughts. That's not what it's about. Do I care if my kids have money more than I care that they're doing something that they love to do and are in amazing relationships? That doesn't have anything to do with money, really. It's not you don't need massive amounts of wealth to experience that. So just try to be honest with yourself about where you are, and then be willing to take risk. I mean, that's the other part of it. Be willing to take some level of risk. Risk does not mean putting your mortgage money on it. Does not mean taking your savings. Yeah. It does not mean
it can literally mean just trying to learn how to do it. Totally. That's like I was saying before, it sucks to not know how to do something. And you went so deep into this, not to blow sunshine up your skirt. But you invited people to collaborate with you on your podcast. I was like, yo, I've been meaning to do a crypto course for ages because people, especially in the bull markets, ask me, the same question from 50 different people. But what you created in that course, and I hit you with a couple ideas, and hours later, it felt like you had the most phenomenal crypto course, and I've taken a bunch. I've participated in it. I'm not just saying that because I literally participated in the creation of this, but if you want to know how to get into it, if you want to understand how to play with the frequency of risk and the frequency of reward, if you want strategies, if you don't know how to make a strategy, you cover all of that. And it's so accessible. I think I watched, obviously editing it and getting it all up there, but I was like, God damn, this is good. So I really encourage everybody to check out Conscious Crypto. Like I said, it'll be linked for sure. And then also the Discord community, which I am one of those Tau people that literally bought it, forgot about it.
Yeah.
I've done that like 3 times with that particular coin as well. And that's like, it can be that kind of play. Like, so not going down the crypto rabbit hole. And just to kind of finish up with one more question here. When someone asks you, like, what do you do? Or more importantly, like, what do you consider your work?
I mean, at this point, I just consider it like doing this stuff I'm excited about. And some of that involves making money, and some of it involves not really making money. And it could make money and it could not. That's all I know at this point in my life. I don't have a clearly identifiable career. I do a lot of different things that allow me to feel good about what I'm doing. And I'm open to a lot of other things too. Like, I don't say, well, this is what I'm doing and it's going on, I'm going to do forever. I envy those people in a lot of ways who can be like, you know what? I wanted to be a doctor. I went to medical school. I became a doctor. I love being a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor until I retire. I'm like, wow, that sounds awesome. I've never been that person. And I do appreciate the flexibility that my life has provided me, or I've provided myself through my life, to be interested in and do a lot of different things and learn about a lot of different stuff. And I just, I think as long as I'm doing stuff that I'm genuinely excited about, that tends to put me in a position where I got enough, things are happening. I'm not going to lie and say that I always believe that. Sometimes it feels like, what the fuck am I doing? I don't know what is going to happen. Like, what am I going to do? I just tend not to let myself stay in those states of consciousness for too long, because they're not productive. Doesn't actually help. Doesn't get you more aligned with what it is. At best, it can maybe light a fire under your ass for a little bit. But if you keep doing it, you're just burning your ass. Like, you're not doing anything. So, I think most of the time, as long as I stay engaged with what I care about, I am lucky enough to get feedback from the outside world and people who engage with it that validates that it's something cool. I mean, if no one was listening or watching or writing nice things, I probably wouldn't do it. I don't want to say I had that much conviction in what I'm doing is the best thing or the most amazing thing that I would just keep doing if no one was tuning in. But I do take it as a validator that people are engaged, and I do get to read all these nice comments and emails and messages on a daily basis. Like, that is a huge boost to believing that this is something that is valuable and will pay off and is continuing to pay off. So that's how I look at it. Yeah.
Where can people find you? Also, like, can you tell us just a little bit about music? I'm pretty sure there's some music projects going on as well, and maybe an event and all sorts of those fun things.
Yeah, we have the live event. I'm going to scope it out in a couple weeks. It's in Brooklyn. It's a place called the Fifth House. We'll do the event there. Probably, I'm thinking it's shaping up for either, like, probably because of the holidays, I'm thinking like early January at this point. It's going to be most likely donation suggested, so it won't cost money for people to get in. I think we just want to do a cool thing where we kind of like get together, talk about, have fun pretty much, and then see if we can't replicate that and do it a couple times, or like every few months do it. That's going on. You can stay tuned for that. I got the Patreon, which I lovingly say I actually give a shit about now. I actually put stuff up there. I am responsible. I am a nice Patreon host. In the past, I've not been, so that's why I make that distinction. There's the Discord that comes with that. I've been doing these group imaginal actualization things. We had our first one kick off this month in November. That's been really fun. Got about 10 people in there, and it's great. I think I'm going to run another one of those in January. This was kind of like the beta launch of it to see if it worked and was doing well. And I'm happy to say it seems to be going really well. People seem to be enjoying it. So am I. And yeah, the music stuff. I mean, I'm constantly putting out music these days. I try to make it as much as I can. It is one of those balls that I have to kind of pay attention to that's in the air to actually juggle it correctly to make sure that I'm getting it out. But, I love making music. It feels very satisfying to me on a very deep level. So I try to engage with it as much as I can. And just release as much as I can. I work with my friends on some music here and there too. They come up and we hang out. Shout out to Sean and Cass. And yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of stuff, not a lot of stuff. Like, I'm trying to do everything I'm doing as best as I can do it now. I'm sure I'll be offering other things in the future, but I'm very aware of whether it feels right to me. Sometimes I like to just get things out like that because it feels so right and I know it. And sometimes I'm like, I don't think just yet. I think I'm going to get this to be a more gelled idea before I kind of put it out and test it. I know you know that from like suggesting a lot of awesome things to me, and like, I'm like, yeah, well, okay. And then like I'll do a bunch of them and then I won't do the other ones. And it's not that I even think that they're not the right ideas. It's just like my bandwidth has a lot to do with that. But I think the rest of this year, it's going to be a lot of refining and just continuing to do what I've already created. And then next year, I'm going to be looking at a little more expansive kind of environment for how we can talk about this stuff. But yeah, the podcast is always there, Synchronicity. People can subscribe and stream wherever. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and they can find you on socials for different readings.
Instagram,
you're doing, like
TikTok.
Spontaneous readings on TikTok. Yeah, cool. Well, Noah, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to get to connect with you, especially knowing how many balls you do have in the air. So thank you so much for making the time.
Yeah, of course.
It's been really special and really awesome. And I think, that's all I got.
All right. Thanks, Nicole.